Trauma. Everyone has it. No one talks about it. It seems easier to stay silent, ignore it, or stuff it than it does to honor it, learn from it, and finally heal. Trauma is debilitating, yet so often we suffer in silence. Trauma is not meant to be battled alone, and we are no longer going to suffer in silence. Together, we are creating a safe place to speak, to share our stories and grow our strength as we heal. Together, we are giving a voice to those who have been silenced, bringing darkness into light and letting God use our stories. Today, we find ourselves again. We relight our spark and let it light up the world. Stop SIS is a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating on issues of trauma and trafficking, as well as the amazing power of the healing journey. Welcome to Stop SIS. Hey, my friend, big welcome back to Stop Suffering in Silence. My name is Denise Walsh, and I'm here with my friend Rachel Timothy.
Hey guys, so glad you're here.
How are you doing today, Miss Rachel?
I'm doing good. I got one homesick with strep throat. It's her first time having it, and so that was a bit dramatic. Getting the whole swab done. She never wants to do that again. But it's kind of been special just to get to spend some one-on-one time with her. So yeah. What about you? What you got going on?
Let's see, what's today? So in my programs, as you know, we do a lot of subconscious work, and we have a hypnosis that we listen to for 30 days. And then we have another one for 30 days with the goal of hardwiring our subconscious expectations. And I found a lady who does a personalized hypnosis for you.
So dang cool.
So today I have an appointment with her, and we meet and talk for like a session, and then she creates it based on my needs or goals or focus or whatever. So
Awesome.
that'll be fun.
That'll be super cool. A lot of people freak out over the word hypnosis though.
They do. And I think it's because of what's been seen on TV.
Yeah.
Even though like TV in itself is actually hypnotizing you. I mean, how many times do we go, hello, are you there?
Right.
To our children. But hypnosis is really what happens. It's that theta state when we're falling asleep, and we're a bit more absorbent.
Yeah.
And the hypnosises that we listen to truly are just speaking life. So when I think of like a visualization, I think of it's asking me to imagine something and use my imagination to picture myself doing something or whatever the case may be. A hypnosis is just like feeding your soul positive truths.
Yeah. Shoot, I remember way back when, I guess I was kind of doing it myself. When I would get prepared for a basketball game, I would sit there and I would picture myself doing certain moves or scoring in a certain way, kind of preparing myself for the game. I don't know. Similar?
Yeah, that's the visualization piece.
Yeah,
for sure. And repetition is really what creates that change.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I'll let you guys know. And then next week we're going to Florida for a Dream Life adventure.
Yes, hurricane, go away.
Yes. So prayers to everybody in Florida right now. Right now the hurricane is passing through, and we know it's not just the hurricane itself, but the surges that come, and then any destruction or cleanup that has to be done. So it can take a few days, I'm sure, or longer, who knows.
Right. But yeah, definite prayers.
Yeah. Well, today we have I'm excited about our conversation because oftentimes, you guys, we think like what's happening in our worlds right now that we could just have a really good discussion about. And there's been a few things popping up recently within the survivor group and just in life itself, stories that we're hearing where we've found that people can live in denial, be experiencing denial, not really understanding how big of a problem it is, And so we thought we'd talk about this. And so there's two definitions I want to describe before we chat. The first one is cognitive dissonance. So this is really interesting because cognitive dissonance is basically the definition states the state of having inconsistent thoughts, beliefs, or attitudes, especially in relating to behavioral decisions or attitude change, which basically means that when you see or hear something that is outside your current worldview, you dismiss it. It's like, this doesn't make sense to me, so it's not happening. Even if there's facts, even if you see it with your own eyes, even it doesn't make sense in your worldview, and so you dismiss it. And there's this disconnect here between reality and what you believe, because what you are hearing or experiencing is not in coherence with your current view of the world.
Yeah, I remember the first time I heard that word or term, and I didn't know what it had meant. But, a year and a half, 2 years ago, my book got published, and for several months there was really just nothing out there. Well, then somebody made a Facebook post that was like, why are we not talking about this book? Like, he was my coach too. He was my teacher too. Like, he did X, Y, and Z with me. And she mentioned cognitive dissonance and how the whole community has ended up in that cognitive dissonance space because they view him as one thing. They see him as the sheep. I mean, if you go back to last week's video, to possibly see him in a light of something different, just it doesn't even settle in their brain.
Yeah, it doesn't, quote, make sense, and so it must not be true.
Yeah. But then what I found out was several members of the community did believe and did believe me and did see a lot of signs in him that showed wolf. But there was a fear aspect. It's a small community. What if I'm the only one? Um, Now you still had the cognitive dissonance in some people, but majority of them were like, yep, me too. You're right.
Yeah, it is interesting when that darkness is brought to light and people go, oh, that makes sense now.
Mm-hmm.
And even Jimmy talked about this last week when his sister came forward. All those little intricacies, all those little oddities,
Yeah.
all those little things that you just kind of push aside, all made sense when he knew the truth.
And I think that's what happened with a lot of these people too, or they remember little girls behind his desk, and they remember people or girls going to his house, or the special treatment or gifts or rubbing on them and stuff during class time. I mean, there were things where there was a girl that he put on top of his desk, standing up, and began to explain to the class what your glutes are by touching her in front of the entire class. And she was mortified. But again, nobody said anything. It's like, well, this is a teacher teaching us stuff. But it's those huge red flags. But because it doesn't match up with what we think it should be, we don't do anything with it.
Well, especially if it's one weird oddity
Yeah.
in a week, or it's not necessarily over and over and over again. It's something that seems easily dismissible.
Yeah. Or, maybe you think he's not being perverted by it or something. Maybe I don't know. You can think the strangest things when
Yeah.
it comes to trying to protect somebody.
Or trying to protect your worldview.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a big part of it.
Because if this is happening in my school, or if this is happening in my town, or if this happens in this world, it is a domino effect, I think, and oftentimes impacts the way you view everything.
Yeah. I remember not too long ago, I was in a Bible study, and there was a woman who was saying, we were talking a little bit about end times and like how bad stuff is getting. And she's like, nope, I want to put myself in a bubble. I don't want to turn on the news. I don't want to know anything that's going on because I can't handle it. So I'm going to act like everything's perfect and wait for God to come back. And that was almost choosing cognitive dissonance in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, another word is denial. And denial is like flat out. I think cognitive dissonance is like, this doesn't mesh, so I'm going to ignore it. And maybe I don't even see it. I don't see the red flags because it doesn't match my worldview. Denial is declaring that something is untrue, like fully not even recognizing that that this happened, that this person is a wolf, that addiction is happening, that it's a violent relationship.
Mhm. Yeah, I saw a quote, I maybe already mentioned this before, on Psychology Today that says, we will push aside anything that doesn't match up with our initial view of a person. So like whatever we initially, our contact with him like looks like, if it's positive and good, we will purposefully, our brain will try to just add to that.
Yeah. So the flip side of this, I just looked up another word. See, like, what is the definition? So denial is saying this is not true. Justification is saying this is why this is right. So, for example, if somebody's in a domestic violence situation, they could be doing a little bit of both, right? Like, this is not violent. He's doing this because I make him mad. So, denying and justification, which is a way to make it fit your worldview.
Yeah. And so really all of this is tied up massively with your emotions, how you feel about yourself, how you feel about the world, how you feel about others, um, decides what you see as fact or fiction.
Yeah. Our worldview is, we all kind of have a different lens based on our past experiences and how healed we are. So let's think about this in a couple different scenarios. What about a parent who hears about abuse within their family or abuse with their child, and yet they're experiencing some denial, some cognitive dissonance, some justification, something?
You know, I've tried to put myself in their shoes, and that is a hard place to be. But bottom line, if let's say one of your children is hurting another child, you need to take care of both. And the abuser, like the way Jimmy Hinton said in the last podcast, you have a window of opportunity there before they turn 18, 19, 20 to intervene and change what is starting to take root in their mind as far as abuse goes. And so that is a huge time to step in and not get stuck in denial, not get stuck in shame, but get the help that the whole family needs at that point. Because if you wait too much longer, it becomes ingrained and I mean, it's devastating.
It's interesting you said shame, because you wonder if the denial is a protective mechanism for the shame and guilt that they may be feeling.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, because that's got to be a terrible feeling to think that your child, hurt somebody. I remember thinking back or seeing back in the news whenever we had some of these school shootings or the bombings, and they talked to the parents of the perpetrator who had done the shooting. And I mean, they feel almost as responsible, probably more responsible than the actual abuser does, because the abuser doesn't carry any weight of what what they did, but the parents do.
Right.
They understand because they have a conscience.
Right. 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 And so denial, justification, cognitive dissonance is putting your head in the sand and really just saying, la, 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 la. I don't hear it. I don't see it. It's not happening. But the problem is that it is happening and children are being hurt. And this is a red flag. And if you're putting your head in the sand and pretending like nothing happened, or pretending like, oh, it's over now, we don't need to talk about it anymore. That again is denial and putting your head in the sand and pretending like everything's fine when in fact it's not.
No, not at all. And it's part of the problem.
Right. And that could be both ways. Like if you hear, because we've heard of stories where the perpetrators come to light. And then again, right, some people say, no, that can't be true. And then some people say, yes, it is true. But then we also have a survivor that comes forward. And we have, again, the denial of that didn't really happen, or that person couldn't have done that to you, or it's over now. Let's just put our head in the sand and pretend like everything's fine.
Yeah, I think people are scared of those heavy feelings, one way or the other. And oftentimes, like, so you hear this, what feels like insane news about an individual. And kind of like Jimmy said, when he found out about his dad, a lot of puzzle pieces fit together. And he was like, okay, yeah, like I see this. But for some people, they'll remember, well, I saw him around kids and he was fine. Like he was really good with them, or he's never treated me like that. And so to see him as a wolf when you've only seen him as a sheep, you really just can't compute it in your brain.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Well, and those heavy feelings, because it's like life's going in a direction, all of a sudden there's a wall and you're forced to pivot with this new information.
Yeah. And
like
it's
it or not.
easier to deny it. It just is.
Right. So how would somebody, okay, so this is the exercise I do with people who clearly are in some sort of denial. And so you can hear this, and this is seen because you can see the fruit of the subconscious rumblings. Like we say, your subconscious is responsible for 97% of our behavior. So even if you say everything's fine, you can see the fruit of anxiety, of lack of confidence, lack of self-worth, insecurity. I mean, pushing yourself to extremes one way or the other, not sleeping, all of those things are kind of fruits of some things not quite right.
Yeah.
And the question that we often, or that I would ask, even if somebody were to say everything's fine, but you can see like, no, it's not. Something's going on. And so the question is what are you pretending not to know?
Yeah, that's a powerful question.
What are you pretending not to know? Because I think that, again, we know we're just choosing to ignore it like that ostrich and poking our head in the sand and pretending like everything is fine. But when you ask yourself that question, you're forced to take those blinders off and really be 100% radically honest with yourself.
Yeah, and it's a tough conversation to have with yourself, but I mean, otherwise you remain stuck more so than you think. I think a lot of people think if I don't believe this, if I'm not even going to let my brain go there, my world will continue just as it was. But that's not the case. That you're changing one way or another at that point. You're choosing one way or the other. So you can't continue with life the way it was.
Right. Life has already been disrupted.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know we have addiction that runs in our family. And when the behaviors are coming home late, not calling, phone being dead, when those behaviors start happening, I mean, I think that's when you start trying to balance things out in your mind because you're like, this isn't right. So how do I make it right? And I make it right through justification. I make it right by saying, well, it's okay. I'll just allow this behavior and I'll, pick up the slack or whatever the case may be. But again, there's a piece of that's at some point you come to a head and you say, okay, life can't be this way anymore.
Yeah.
Life can't be this way anymore. And we've got to take off that lens of denial and really look at what's happening in our families, in our world.
Yeah, and I think if we address it from the very beginning, red flag, because oftentimes we want to stay in comfort. That is what our subconscious is aiming for. That's what our anxiety is aiming for. We want comfortable. And when somebody raises an issue, it's going to be uncomfortable to meet it, to like see what it actually is. And so we try to stay in our comfortable, but the more that we do that, the bigger the issue becomes. and the more problems it'll lead to in the future.
Right. Right. Yeah. So initial red flags, what would be some good examples of an initial red flag for somebody to say, okay, I can't just bury this?
Are you talking about like if seeing red flags if somebody in your life is a perpetrator?
Well, I think we could have different examples. Yeah. I mean, a domestic violence situation is interesting too, because there's like the honeymoon. So with domestic, I mean, this happens with addiction. This happens with any sort of, oh, I'm so sorry, I won't do that again. Then there's this honeymoon phase of like presence, or I'll fix it, make everything better. And then like time goes on, and then nope, it happens again. And oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. When we taught that cycle in the anger management classes, and because again, it's this cycle can happen with any sort of destructive behavior, whether it be anger, whether it be an eating disorder, whether it be addiction, whether it be a perpetrator, where there's an event that happens, then there can be this. I mean, I think with perpetrator, they're not necessarily, well, did you get a honeymoon phase? Were there times where you got extra presents and things?
When I was being abused as a kid?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Absolutely.
it might not be as, I'm so sorry. There might not be an apology that happens, but there's just love bombing.
Yeah. And I mean, there was apologies too. He would say to me, that he was sorry. This is not the Christian that he wants to be. He wants to be better. And I fell for it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like a domestic violence cycle to a T, where the abuse happens, the incident happens. I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again. Blah, 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 blah. Love bomb, love bomb, love bomb, love bomb. And then the cycle happens again.
Yeah.
So I think knowing that cycle is a good, at least helpful information, because you can see yourself in it. Or as a parent, you could potentially see someone else in that type of behavior, where it's abuse and then the love bombing.
Yeah. I think it's important to address too, if somebody in your life is doing some oddities that you typically you get that little bit of a gut feeling like, that's weird. Why every time that I walk across his classroom do I see a little girl on his lap? Like that's odd. The best way to love somebody is to address it immediately.
Yeah.
And that was always the opposite in my mind as trauma brain, or maybe just how I was. I felt like not addressing it and just dealing with like my own, I don't know, like I felt like addressing it would be, that confrontation would be bad, whereas, or would cause discord in our relationship or whatever. But the truth is, if you love somebody, addressing those oddities from the get-go, even just simply saying, hey, what you're doing looks odd, just FYI. And I mean, I need to address it with you. Granny is great about that. That is one of her biggest things, is just address it in the moment and don't let it fester for however long and grow, and then look back and wish you had said something years ago.
Right. Because there's this element of like, it happens once a year, and then twice a year, and every quarter, and then every day, and then all of a sudden it's a daily act, And when you get into that spot, if you think, oh, it won't happen. I mean, it just doesn't take as long to get to that daily abuse, that daily aggression, that daily addiction.
Yeah, and you don't know that you're even seeing it all.
Right.
You see a kid sitting on his lap every day, but you don't know what else is going on,
Well, and that's the thing. If we catch these oddities in the moment, what else is happening?
Exactly.
And I think I was talking to a friend who saw a teacher and a child in a room by themselves. And then he was down fixing his button on his pants. So he says, and so she turned on the light, and then the teacher says, "Oh, I'm just helping fix his button in here in the dark." If you see that, I mean, that's obviously a very extreme example, but if you see an oddity, what else is happening? And I think that's what we really want to understand, is that there's always more under the surface. And so we just want to be as cautious as possible.
Yeah. And I feel like more than anything, our culture is like, well, I don't want to accuse somebody of something that they didn't do, like, or have an accusation that really it was innocent. We need more of people being willing to rock the boat.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I remember there were times when we would say, hey, if somebody is being weird or odd or coming to you or anybody in a threatening manner, take a picture of them. Take a picture of them. And the thought is, well, what if I'm wrong? And the reality is, who cares?
Right.
Who cares?
Right.
So,
Yep.
okay. So we've got parents that can live in denial that this is happening. We also have survivors that could live in denial, or perpetrators. What do you think?
Oh, it's hard for me to say that perpetrators live in denial. I think they are masterminds. But I have seen survivors who justify behaviors. So when my book started coming out, oh my goodness, the grooming portion of my book has rocked so many people's lives because they saw it as a relationship in their own life with somebody. And then to put the word grooming with it, I remember when I was at my eating disorder facility back in 2017, I was in the process of writing this book. And actually, all of the girls wanted to read it. And so I gave them a copy of it and they read it. And one of the girls fell apart. And she's like, I thought my ballet coach loved me. I thought he was my boyfriend. But now I'm seeing I was groomed. And I mean, we had to like call in the counselors and they said, Rachel, you can't let these girls read any more of your book without a counselor nearby. But it was just like this all of a sudden, oh,
Yes.
okay, this isn't okay.
Yeah. Well, and again, we do whatever we can to make life seem okay.
Mm-hmm.
But asking yourself, what am I pretending not to know? Can put I mean, even with, you think of financial struggles, people in massive debt, but are still going out to Disney every other year, or, they're like putting their head in the sand saying, this is fine, everything's fine. Look, but the reality is they're drowning and they're not actually addressing any of those issues, which means they're going to be drowning for longer. They're going to be in more deep water the longer that it goes.
Yeah, that impulsiveness all of a sudden changes their view of the world. Like a minute ago, they were in super big debt, and now this impulsiveness, but I need this, and this is the way that I can get it, takes over.
Right. I wonder if denial, especially if there's this underlying shame or guilt, which means I don't want to look at it and I don't want to process through it, I don't want to bring it up, if it clouds long-term thinking, meaning I want what I want now, like if it's the short-term gratification. I don't know.
Yeah. I keep thinking of this mom that I know, and her son she would say he just has this amazing relationship with kids, and kids just love him and they just flock to him, and he doesn't even have to say anything, and he's just loved on by these kids. Hearing that alone is a red flag to me, like it's odd. But hearing her side of things that went on that her son did, and hearing the truth of the community and what her son did, is just like night and day. You would think you were hearing about two totally different people. And so it just makes me wonder, yeah, what is going on in the brain to just not accept it? Maybe she I've heard too that people will say they'll only there, or maybe you told me this, your brain will only accept the things that match with what you're believing. So, I mean, maybe she just doesn't even hear the other. I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds like that cognitive dissonance where it's like, that doesn't make sense in my worldview, so I'm going to reject it.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, the scary thing is that more children are being hurt because of it.
exactly. And I think if you told this mom of another man doing the exact same things that her son is doing, she would say, get him away from children. That is not okay. Like, but then when it's her son, it changes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think he's meaning anything by it.
Right.
How does that happen?
We can live in denial for years, justifying our behaviors or others' behaviors, just trying to make ourselves be at this like equilibrium, homeostasis. Okay. And I think it's because we feel like if we allow the truth to be front and center, it will rock everything.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, the boat is already rocked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think too, I mean, yeah, it is going to rock everything, but there is life like on the other side. Like things are not going to stay. I think that's where I get often too, is when I see a confrontation coming, I see that confrontation lasting 30 years, when in reality, it's going to be a day, of arguing and discomfort. But we blow it up maybe bigger as far as how awful our life will become.
Right. We magnify for sure. I mean, even if the thought is a divorce or the thought is I'm going to have to set boundaries with my family, or I'm going to have to tell my parents something that happened that they are going to be shocked about, or, whatever it is, it can feel like, we talk. I don't know if you've ever seen the Saturday Night Live. It's totally dating me, but there's a Saturday Night Live clip where he's like basically it makes a mountain out of a molehill, and like, now we live in a van down by the river kind of attitude. Like,
Yeah.
now everything, but that's never true.
Oh, shoot. I am guilty of that. I do that all the time. Like, this is what's going to happen if I say something.
Yeah.
And then in reality, it's nowhere near that.
Right. And truth always wins. And so I know people that have had to have hard truths, and they've had to say, my husband is an active addict and he is not getting help. And so I do not choose to be in this situation anymore. And that is a hard thing to
Oh,
say, you know what, I'm done and I'm leaving. But they're thriving on the other side.
yeah.
Or after a decade saying, you know what, I'm thinking of those in divorce, but you also can think of those who've had to set boundaries with family members who keep trying to go back. I want to make this work. I want Thanksgiving to be okay, but it's just not okay. And
Yeah.
as soon as we are able to be honest with ourselves and make some of those changes, we've seen girls thrive creating new communities and setting boundaries with their family.
Right. And it makes me think, as you're saying, truth always wins. If you're presenting truth to somebody who's doing things wrong, somebody who is not psychopathic will eventually make the decision to make that turnaround and do better. It will be a blessing to them for you to say that truth. But on the flip side, if you say that truth to somebody who is not going to change, is psychopathic, that's a blessing for you to be able to see that and see their reaction and know, okay, I did my part. I raised my voice. They get to choose from here where they go.
Yeah, that's powerful. At the end of the day, only good things come out of hard conversations, whether it's good information for you to make a powerful choice, or it's good information for them to make the change they need.
Yeah.
What about a parent? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just know oftentimes for me, I felt like me raising the truth would hurt people. And that's oftentimes why I didn't.
Yeah. And what did you find on the other side of that?
That keeping the truth in actually hurt people more
And hurt you more?
and hurt me more, hurt me a lot more. But at the time, I didn't care about that because I didn't have any self-love. My main thing was I didn't want to hurt others. And that, survivors often get stuck in that spot of feeling like they're the one rocking the boat by saying the truth, when that's not the case. It's not their doing. It's them exposing it, but they are not the ones who made that action.
Right. And what do parents do when they either see red flag behavior out of their children? I'm thinking more of survivors. All of a sudden, their teenagers retreat, or they start noticing cutting or burning, or like risky behaviors that they didn't see before. It's a tricky thing, I can imagine. I have an 11-year-old, so I'm not quite there yet. To bring up a tough subject with a teenager who's super emotional, sensitive, and you don't want to push them farther away, but you also want them to know that you love them and you're here for them and you want to know.
Mm-hmm. In my opinion, and this is what is coming to my mind now, you pause life and you are intentionally involved and actively finding out what's going on, how you can support them, but pause your life. Like all of a sudden, this child needs your undivided, full attention. No sports. I mean, I'm saying you pause life, you go somewhere, you rent a cabin, and you dive into their heart. Because the more you try to stuff it and say, oh, I'm maybe it's just, hard at school, or maybe it's, you don't know. And until you really get to the deeper level of it, and until your child feels like, oh, they're okay to pause their life to know more about me, you maybe will never find out the answer until they're 40 years old and they say, hey, mom, guess what? Let me tell you what happened.
Yeah. It's creating that space for them to be honest, which takes so much courage to be honest. I mean, think about us as adults. If we want to have a hard conversation, it's not easy. And you can imagine as a teenager, it's not easy to talk about these hard things. It takes a ton of courage, a ton of bravery, especially because we internalize when bad things happen and we think that must mean I'm bad. What did I do to create or cause the situation? And so it's not just an hour.
No, you have to pause life. And I can think of so many situations right now where they dealt with it for an hour and they felt like, okay, I bet the kid gets it. I bet we're good now. And it's been 2 years now of this ongoing risky behavior and still being involved in tons of things. The child is still going out on dates, gets a car, gets all these different things, like life is going full force and nothing's getting solved. And I guarantee you more hurt is happening.
Right.
You just don't want to think that way.
Now, I know a lot of parents will say, I am not qualified to have these conversations. Do I immediately take my child to a counselor? Do I immediately? And I think here's the deal. Nobody cares more about your child than you do. And creating that space to even if you don't say anything for the whole first day, but you just cook together, you go for walks, what you're doing is you're allowing your child to relax enough to actually say something. And ongoing, sure, absolutely. Counseling ongoing, great. But I don't love, and this is going into our parent episode. I don't love when parents say, my child's acting up, can you fix it? Because as a therapist, I got that all the time. My child's XYZ, can you make him better? And guess what? The thing that makes your child better is a relationship with you, always. if you're a safe person.
Right.
Always. And so I mean, of course I would work with the child, but it was always about the parent-child relationship. Something was strained there, and they, were acting out. Maybe something happened that wasn't in the family, but they didn't feel like they could talk about it. So the child's stuffing it under. Anyway, there's a lot of things to be said about that. But I love your idea of really taking a weekend, a week, and just being,
Mm-hmm.
which allows the child's nervous system to relax enough
Yeah.
to share.
Yeah. One thing that Granny has taught me too is a lot of times I was protecting my kids in my mind from not sharing some of the hard things going on in our life. But yet they saw it. I mean, they felt it. And so being real with them about what is even going on in my life opens that line of communication. And so whether I have a quote in my bathroom, I maybe need to go get it so I can remember exactly, but um, your daughter will be stronger knowing your highs and lows as a mom, like knowing that's not the way the quote goes, but it's important for your daughter to know like what you've been through.
Yeah.
It gives them a strength instead of hiding it and acting like life is all good. I know of one situation where a mom was like, yeah, for your entire, junior high years, I was extremely depressed. And every time you would go to school, I would just sit in the shower for hours and hours. Well, the child picked up on something's not okay, but you'd be surprised what a child can handle if you say it in the right way. You don't have to protect them from emotions. Actually, they need to be able to feel emotions so that they can be a functioning adult when it comes to emotions.
How many times do people say to me, I don't know anything about like money mindset or finances, because finances were never talked about in our home. I never really learned about how money works because we just didn't even talk about it. Or when we did, it was negative. Well, you
Mhm.
think about that with any sort of topic in our life. If it's not talked about, the child's not really learning about it. And so even just saying things like, I'm having a bad day because, or this is what I'll say. I'll say, I'm disappointed today because this happened.
Yeah.
Can I have a hug?
Yep.
And my goal is to model what it feels like to handle a disappointment, to handle something that's not going right. Or I'll say, I'm feeling lonely. Does anybody want to go for a bike ride?
Mhm.
Something like that. And I'm not perfect, but I think it's interesting to bring those emotional words into conversation.
Yeah. And then for them to see your actions behind it. If they see you isolating but don't know why, they will follow suit. Or if they see you running away from the problem, they will follow suit.
Right. Because they'll think that, I mean, and especially in the subconscious programming, they'll think this is what we do. When we have a problem, we work harder.
Right.
We avoid it.
Right.
We stuff it. We pretend like it'll go away.
Yep. This reminds me of a time with my oldest. It's been probably a year and a half ago, and people who know me very well know that there was a show anyway that was very disappointing for me. And after the show, I was speechless. Like I couldn't form words. It hurt so much. The humiliation, the disappointment, the fear. Um, I was rocked, and my son was with me, and he kept saying, Mom, what's wrong? And I literally could not form words to explain to my son. And we were close to the ocean at that time, and so he had wanted to go back to the ocean one more time, and so we went out to the beach. And my husband and him were out playing in the water, and I just sat on the beach and just numb and stunned and overwhelmed. But there was a point then when my son walked up to me, sat down next to me on the beach, and I looked at him and I said, Bud, things didn't go real good. And I said, it hurts, but it's okay because I know that God holds tomorrow. And I know that he has a perfect plan. Doesn't mean I don't hurt like crazy right now, but I still know that everything is okay because God's in control. And we cried together, but he was able to see, okay, bad things happen. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel it in the moment, but it's also okay to remind yourself of the hope that even when bad things happen, we can always hold on to that hope of God. And that's one memory from that whole situation that I feel like it didn't necessarily make it all okay, but it was a good thing that came from it, was just getting to experience that hardship with him.
Right. Being honest.
Yeah.
Rather than pretending. Because obviously kids can pick up on what the feeling is of the home.
Oh yeah.
I have a friend who went through a really bad breakup and she was devastated, just devastated. She thought they were going to get married, all these things. And then like 2 or 3 years later, she found out that her mom was engaged before she met her dad, and the engagement got broken off. And she thought, I went through this super hard emotional breakup, and you never once shared that you also had a hard emotional breakup, regardless of what the story was around the, being engaged and then calling it off. That was not even something she knew until she was in her 20s.
Yeah.
And you think, as parents, I think it's good for our kids to know how that hard stuff has happened and that we've gotten through it and how we've gotten through it. And it ended up feeling like a betrayal to her because she thought, here you are consoling me, and yet you're not even being honest.
Right. It's almost like you want to fix the emotions in the person so bad, but really what they need is for you to walk through that with them in an honest way of, conversation back and forth, and not just fix what I'm feeling right now. Let's walk through life hand in hand.
Oftentimes, I think the best thing you can do when somebody is having a hard day or something bad has happened is just give them a big hug and say, gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, that does suck. Just because I think oftentimes we can get into trying to fix it or whatever immediately, when we'll do that tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. The house is on fire today. We lost everything today.
Yeah.
Let's mourn.
Yeah.
Tomorrow we'll start cleaning up.
Yeah. Yeah. But if you just pretend like the house isn't on fire, the house is still on fire, whether you acknowledge it or not.
And you end up getting burnt up with it.
Right. Right.
Because you don't get out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, there's so many emotions tied to these decisions of denial, and a lot of it is guilt and shame that maybe isn't even ours to carry. Like, as a parent of somebody who becomes an abuser, that doesn't mean you were a bad parent. That means it doesn't mean you didn't love them or you did something wrong. It means Satan got a foothold on your child, and let's deal with it instead of letting it get worse and acting like it's not there. I mean, that would be the most loving thing that you could do, is let's deal with it.
Yeah. And if you are the mom of a survivor, that doesn't mean that you did anything wrong.
Right.
You can do everything right, and life still happens. Yes.
And it's not a death sentence. It doesn't mean, all is lost in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, there's plenty. Rachel is one of them. Plenty of great examples of people who have had trauma and still thrive.
Yep. Yep. Yes, it's a big deal, but oftentimes we do make a mountain out of a molehill when it comes to how devastating it will be to those around us.
Yeah. So if you if you are listening to this and you're like, la, 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 there's things happening in my life that I am not quite addressing or I'm allowing to fester. We know it's there. It's this like under rumbling. Ask yourself the question, what am I pretending not to know? And then brain dump your answers and just write and get it all out of your body. Just write. And then you get to ask yourself, what is one thing I could do about this today? Who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to schedule a weekend with? Who do I need to invite to coffee? What do I need to be radically honest about so that you can move forward? Because even if it feels like addressing the issue at hand is going to rock the boat, the reality is the boat is already rocked.
Mm-hmm.
So handling it will smooth things over much faster. And life could be even better once these things are addressed.
Exactly. That's truth.
So any last words to a survivor, to a parent out there who maybe they're hearing shocking things about what's happening at their school or within their communities?
Yeah. Truth always wins. Truth always wins. And so being honest with yourself, being honest with those around you, and not trying, like, let's say you finally write down and brain dump your truth, share it with other people too, because maybe they have a similar truth, or just keeping in isolation with it is going to cause more issues. So I would say, anytime there's in question, what do I do? No, I'm not a confrontational person, but truth will win. So go with the truth and do it with somebody with you.
Yeah. Have those hard conversations.
Have that community.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I am going to end with an I declare. But if you are listening, we want to say thank you so much for your support. Please consider writing a review on Spotify or Apple Podcast. Leave us a comment on YouTube. All of that is super helpful. Please share this with anybody you know who is either a parent or a survivor or somebody who wants to support survivors, which should be everybody. Like we all fit into. There's a lot of people who need to know this information. And if you are looking to support a survivor, then check out our GoFundMe. I'm creating plans for 2023 fundraising events and survivor books and 90-day U-turn cohorts, as well as even a trauma program that will be available on our website. And so we would appreciate any and all donations to help continue keep this work alive and growing, because we know that the ripple effect of healed humans impacts the world. That's what's going to make this world a better place.
Absolutely.
All right. So I have an I declare for us to end with. It says, I declare that I have a sound mind filled with good thoughts, not thoughts of defeat. By faith, I am well able. I am anointed. I am equipped. I am empowered. My thoughts are guided by God's word every day. No obstacle can defeat me because my mind is programmed for victory. This is my declaration, and this is my declaration for you. Have an awesome day, you guys. See you next week. Thank you so much for listening to this powerful episode of Stop Suffering in Silence. If you are interested in booking Rachel to speak at your school, your church, or on your podcast, then please email OpenBlindEyes@protonmail.com. If you are interested in sponsoring a survivor on their healing journey and would like to donate to Stop SIS, then please check out the link in the description box or show notes below, or you can email stopsis@protonmail.com. And finally, if you are currently suffering in silence, or you know somebody who is, whether they're dealing with a current trauma or one from the past, then we will always recommend that you reach out to your local resources and find a counselor that you can trust, because nobody is meant to suffer alone. Have an amazing week, and thank you for being here.